Do a little intro. Okay. And welcome back to centralcoastradio.com. We've got something very, very special for you right now. There is a brand new film that is opening up at the Sydney Film Festival on June the 11th. It's called Freedom is Beautiful. It also has another screening on June 18th. And we thought today we would actually get the director and the filmmaker behind this film on the phone to chat a little bit about it. So, welcome to the program, Angus McDonald.
Thanks, Dave. It's really nice to be with you. Great.
So, Angus, tell us a little bit about Freedom is Beautiful. I've had the chance to watch it, but our listeners haven't. So, tell us a little bit about this amazing documentary that you've been able to put together.
Well, Freedom is Beautiful is a 67-minute feature that tells the story of two really remarkable, inspirational Kurdish refugees who fled persecution in Iran in 2013, arrived in Australia seeking asylum, and then spent the next 8 years, almost 8 years, being held by the federal government under its hardline refugee policy until they were eventually freed a couple of years ago. And the story really focuses on the way they use their music and their art and their poetry. They're very talented artists as a form of resistance and a way to make connections on the outside world. And they're very charismatic and articulate guys. And they formed this deep friendship on Manus Island based around their love of music and art. And they fought the system peacefully using their music and art. And it's really, I guess, a way of them telling their stories, sharing their stories with us. And it's a hopeful film, actually. We don't shy away from confronting the difficulties they had in detention, but I would say that it's a film that is all about hope and inspiration and the way we can support each other.
Definitely, Angus, tell us a little bit about how you first became involved in this story as well, and what made you decide to make this documentary.
Well, I've been, I guess I've been working in various ways as an artist to try and contribute to changes in refugee policy since about 2016 as a painter and as a filmmaker. And a very close friend of mine called Craig Foster, who your listeners might know, is also heavily engaged in this space. And he was friends with both Farhad and Moz, who are the subjects in my film. And he reached out to me a couple of years ago and told me about them and asked me if I would make some content around one of them, Moz, who was still in detention at that time, and introduced me to Moz. And I started to make that content. And while I was doing it, he was actually released, which was fantastic news. He was in hotel detention in Melbourne. And after that, I flew down to Melbourne and I met Farhad and Moz with Craig. And at that time, their stories were so amazing, and I was so inspired by them both, and also loved their friendship. I decided that maybe we should make a longer form film and share their story with the public. And I guess that's how it all started. And then 2 years later, we finally finished the film.
What was Farhad and Moz's response when you first went to them and said, "Oh, I want to make a film about what you've been through"?
Well, they were really open to it, but I guess it just took a while for us to get to know each other, to form a friendship. And we're very close friends now. And but they certainly could see that by doing that, there was a way to, a way to further their activism in a new direction, because they're both very committed to those asylum seekers and refugees that are still either held under the government's offshore processing regime or otherwise on temporary protection visas in the community. So I think they saw a way in which that could be useful for them to continue their activism. And also we got on really well. And I kind of, I guess, told them the way I could see a film like this working, that I wanted them to be able to tell their own stories without anyone getting in the way, and focus on their art and music. And I think they really liked the idea. And we went from there, and it really just evolved organically from that point. I didn't know I was going to make a feature. I thought I was going to make a short. But then it then it became a long short, and then it became a feature. I think just because we had so much fantastic content, and they're really wonderful on screen and very talented. So it was very much an organic process, and they were really fantastic and went along with it the whole way.
It was a very weird time around that time as well when this a lot of this takes place because of course it was
Mm-hmm.
when Novak Djokovic got put into
Yeah.
detention in Melbourne, and suddenly there were people out on the streets protesting and standing outside the hotel.
Mm.
But it was kind of ironic because there'd been people that had been in that hotel for years in
Yeah.
hotel detention. Did did things like that at that time kind of inspire you with the film as well?
Well, yeah, I think so because one of the subjects of my film was in that same place that Djokovic was held,
Yeah,
and I think that was a really pivotal moment because the exposure and the following of Djokovic really shone a light on what was happening in Melbourne. Because amazingly, whether your listeners would believe it or not, even people that live and work very close to that Park Hotel in Melbourne, which has been used as an alternative place of detention, didn't know what was going on there.
yeah,
And I think that incident with Djokovic really exposed what was happening there to a lot more people and was very useful. And there have been a lot of incidents like that seem to happen every now and then that are able to kind of give that whole issue a bit of a lift in the public's mind and reach that sort of larger group of mainstream Australia that aren't aware of it. So that was important. And Djokovic did a great thing when he got back to when he left Australia after that. He did go back and give a press conference sometime later, expressing a lot of sympathy and empathy for the men that were held there and making his views known. And I really pay tribute to him for doing that because he didn't need to.
yeah.
But that was also very helpful, in this whole kind of, I guess, campaign to try and release people that are being held that way for so many years.
Definitely. Now, I found myself going on a very emotional journey when I was watching this film. What was that journey like for you as a filmmaker? Like you said, you've been working with refugees since 2016, but what kind of journey did you go on with this film when you were putting it together?
Well, I guess because I've been working in this space a long time, and I realised that it's a confronting subject for a lot of people, and a lot of Australians, decent Australians, and I think Australians are really decent people. It's difficult to confront this issue, but it's very, very hard to watch. It's very, very hard to absorb, and everybody has their own issues in their life, and they're important. So guess the things about taking this journey and creating a feature film, which is longer, was to make sure that I told the story in a way that was positive and constructive.
Yeah,
That I focused on the men as inspirational figures, and I didn't really focus on things that were overly negative. I mean, it's a truthful and authentic account that they've told themselves of their stories, but it's very important to tell people in the case like theirs, the way other Australians connected with them and helped them and supported them and kept them, I guess, kept their state of mind okay, even though they were under so much pressure. All the wonderful things that happened through their activism, through their music and art, and those connections they made with Australians on the outside. That's really a big focus of the film, and I think that's why it's such a positive and inspirational story. It's not just about the suffering. It's not just about the experience they had. It's about a lot more than that.
definitely. And once again, for our listeners who haven't seen the film, tell us a little bit about the music and art that Farhad and Moz was doing, because music and art plays such an important part in their story, and it shows just how that can help people as well. I've worked in programs before where we've used music and art to help people with
Mm-hmm.
disabilities and to help people who have been long-term
Mm-hmm.
unemployed. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about how music and art help these two men.
Yeah, well, that's such an interesting point to raise, Dave, because um, these two guys are really super talented musicians, painters, poets, and they come from a culture, a Kurdish culture, where art and music is so important and is used as a form of resistance. So it was was an easy choice to focus on those kind of creative talents that both men had, because they're so exceptional. But also, I really wanted to show the way they used art, in their, in a way to survive the experience they were in. So I guess if I had to summarize it, I'd say that music and art played three really vital roles for them while they were held in detention. The first one was to keep them, I guess, sane, or a way for them to find tranquility when they were under so much pressure and there was so much suffering being inflicted around them by the system. They used music and art as a way to escape, to a way to transport themselves in the way that I guess some of those programs you've been involved with people, art's so amazing for that. And the second thing it did was, by creating songs and paintings, they were able to, I guess, share those messages of resistance through their creative work. And that was a very, very important way to undertake their activism. And then the third thing really was, through sharing all their songs and their paintings and their poetry, they were able to form these really fantastic connections on the outside, with Australian people who are also in the creative field. And creating that network through their art was a really important thing in their survival, I guess, over all those years. So yeah, art and music, the idea, the power of it was so important, and I've tried to show specifically how in the film.
Yeah, there's an amazing part of the film, and for all of our listeners out there, Freedom is Beautiful has its world premiere at the Sydney Film Festival on June the 11th. There is also another screening on June the 18th, and then it'll be embarking on an international festival run. Angus, I've got to ask, because I know we're running out of time very quickly, is the hope that the film will eventually get a cinema release in Australia as well?
Yeah, I hope so. We haven't really decided that yet. I think we're just going to go through and through the festivals, and we're definitely going to have a lot of community screenings around the country so that we can share the film with people. That's definitely on the agenda. And then, yeah, hopefully it will get to cinemas, but we haven't really got that far yet. But I'd love to get as many Australian eyes on the film as possible, so that as many people as possible can learn the stories of these two inspirational guys. Yeah.
I would love to see that as well, because it is such an empowering and fascinating film to watch. It's so important. To finish off the interview, what would you like people to take away from this film after they've sat down to watch Freedom is Beautiful?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess I would like people to realize that, reaching out and helping other people that are struggling, or are suffering under the system. There are many, many ways that we can help each other, and even a problem as big as that, an issue that involves so many people. You can do very small things in your life that can make a big difference to people in those situations. And I think if people go and see the film and understand that and take that message away, then I'll be so happy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Angus, for taking the time to chat to us today. It's been an absolute honor having you on the show, and we hope a lot of our listeners will head along and check out this very important film.
Oh, thanks for having me, Dave. So good to you. Thanks.
No problem, mate. I'll let you go. Stay safe, but thank you so much.
Okay. See you.
Awesome.